Welcome to the council meeting. I'll just open with karakia, tuia karunga, tuia kararo, tuia karoto, tuia karawaho, tuia tātou te tangata, have no here, still online, so yes, we are all here. We'll now move on to the public forum. So we have one person registered to speak in public forum on behalf of the Sam's Creek Collective. So Julie Downard, welcome. Speaking on behalf of an organisation, so you have 10 minutes. I will start the clock and I'll give you a nod at about 9 if you're still talking at that point. Okay. All right, thank you.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for inviting me to present today. I have a background in chemistry and chemical engineering, and I'd like to take you through the risks from the proposed gold mine at Sam's Creek in Golden Bay. Please check out our website, which is up there, and you'll get the full slide pack with notes. Sam's Creek is just southwest of Upper Tarakohe. And the Tarakohe Valley waterways feed into the Marble Aquifer, which supplies town and bore water to residents and businesses and feeds Pupu Springs and the submarine springs out in the bay near the mussel farm. Siren Gold has applied under the Fast Track Bill to mine for gold at Sam's Creek. I think of it more as an arsenic mine because of the 11 million tonnes of ore, 75,000 tonnes are arsenic, 1,500 tonnes are lead, and there's just 25 tonnes of gold. So this is not the old style of mining where you find gold nuggets or even flakes of gold. The metals are bound as rock to sulphur. So you have to crush it to a fine dust, which makes it very toxic and chemically reactive. If it gets into the environment, it bioaccumulates in people, animals, and plants. Chemicals are added to extract the gold. These chemicals are very toxic and they end up in the waste. So a flotation method is used to concentrate most of the gold arsenic mix into a small amount of the sludge. And Siren proposed to bag this for transport, possibly to a barge at Tarakohe. So transporting this stuff is a high-risk activity, and any accident would release arsenic dust into the environment. And here's that barge aground at Carter's Beach last week, and they got lucky that that's all that happened. So there's considerable waste from this process, including the remaining arsenic, which needs to go somewhere. So Siren plans to tunnel in from somewhere near Upper Tarakohe with the waste stored in a tailings dam in the headwaters of the Waitui stream. So you can see the headwaters over there near the pink line. Tailings dams are big. 11 million tonnes of rock dust would cover the Tarakohe CBD to a height of 54 metres. So you find a steep-sided valley high up in the headwaters where there's less water runoff, and you construct a dam, pile all the tailings in, and then let water accumulate on top of it. So that's Siren's mining proposal and a little bit about our whenua. What links them is the law, which states the terms and conditions under which companies can mine. So I want to show why it's important that we get those terms and conditions right. So despite best intentions, tailings failures, that's the waste heaps, are quite common. So this dam failure cost taxpayers $40 million. And this is not some impoverished state, it's Canada. A court called this mine an irresponsible venture. It cost the government millions in cleanup after they went bankrupt. Minto went bankrupt and the cleanup cost 20 million more than the security bond that they paid. I wish I had time to show you a video about the bankrupt mine near Yellowknife. Arsenic dust now covers a huge area adjacent to the city. Residents have high levels of arsenic and people have died from drinking the water. Their attempt to fix it is costing them over 900 million, and it's not at all certain that it'll work. So here, just last month, the cyanide leach heap collapsed. Loss of life was only narrowly avoided as 2 million tonnes of tailings slid down the hill. The cause? Unsafe practice. Frequent failures had been covered up. So Kiwi Gerald Freeman highlights this. Oceania Gold deliberately breached their consent by cutting a channel through the pit wall to drain floodwaters, releasing toxic sludge into the creek. And the fine was just $24,000, hardly an incentive to be careful. So without strong and robust environmental controls, companies going after big profits often take shortcuts. Maybe you're thinking, well, that's Canada, New Zealand's different. Well, we have our own examples. So Tui mine cost us 22 million because of an unstable tailings dam. The Tarakohe River was so polluted, it was devoid of all life. Last month, the gold mine in the Waikato collapsed, leaching arsenic into the water. And more toxic sediment will leach into the river every time it rains. So these orange rivers happen all the time. Even more common, the main risk is acid leaching. It's almost impossible to prevent. It starts up most actively after the mine is closed, when the mine company is gone, as the storage linings fail, whether that be in 50 or 500 years. And Siren would very much not like you to know that the tailings dam at Macrae's mine in central Otago is leaking right now. And by the way, that's not their first failure. And that's a mine consented under the RMA. So even with the best controls, tailings facilities don't last forever, but arsenic does. So you don't have to look far to find these examples. It was a quick search on the net. None of this was supposed to happen, but it did. And we have earthquakes. We have the Alpine fault. Had it been on marble, Macrae's leak wouldn't have been spotted, because in porous rock, like marble, liquid goes straight down into the groundwater. So Siren has said they won't build the tailings dam on porous ground. Well, they might be able to find some non-porous ground up there in the headwaters, though I can't see any. But even if they do, if there's an accident, it will quite quickly flow out onto onto porous ground and into the aquifer, and there'll be no retrieving it. So what we face is having 4,000 tonnes of arsenic, enough to kill every person on the planet, sitting above or near a porous marble aquifer in Apataka, where any pollution threatens both our health and our economy. So we can't sell toxic beef, milk, mussels, or salmon, not to mention tourism. Siren Gold's financial situation is not flash. That's 6 cents. They don't know if Sam's Creek is worth mining. They don't know whether they'll mine themselves or on-sell the rights. They don't know whether it will be open cast or underground. They can't guarantee they won't do cyanide processing here. And yet they've applied to mine under the fast track. Changes in conditions often happen without any consultation. So we and you won't necessarily know. But I say it's irrelevant what kind of mine they choose, because any mine will result in arsenic tailings being stored near a marble aquifer of world-class significance. We've known about the gold up there for 50 years. Several companies have walked away from it. It's marginally economic at best and a huge risk. So if they start and then go bust, who pays for the cleanup? Who provides a replacement water supply? How will it be when people can't swim or fish in the bay? And what happens to rates if the mining company funding doesn't cover all the costs of the required improvements to infrastructure? The risk is magnified by the fast track bill, which bypasses the RMA and fails to allow much consultation with those affected, such as you, and none with local communities. It allows very little time for expert consultation. The water conservation order would be disregarded. The fast track means you won't find the details out until it's too late. So in conclusion, the failure rate of tailings dams is high. The consequences of failure are catastrophic. You don't have to wait until it's too late. We're asking you to speak out against this mine, to oppose this mine in every way you possibly can. Please tell the government to stop gambling with our water. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for taking the time and coming over the hill and presenting in the public forum today, and to those who have come over with you to support. Thank you as well. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, we will now move on with the balance of the agenda. So declarations of interest. There are none. Minutes of previous meetings. So there's Tasman District Council meeting from the 1st of August, both open and confidential. Someone like to move the open minutes? Councillor Mailing, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. In terms of the confidential minutes, move Councillor Dowler, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. And the minutes from the 5th of September. Is there a mover? Move Councillor Kinnamock. Seconded Councillor Dakey. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Just before we move to the first item, Councillor Walker has to be away just before 2. So if we haven't reached the confidential part of the agenda pre-lunch, we will take it immediately after lunch. And the first item we will take is the Motueka referral report in relation to the service centre, etc. So, and we'll break at 12:30 for lunch and reconvene at 1. With that, I will come across to the first report in terms of referral report recommendation around Regional Landfill Business Unit, and that is Mike Schrewer. Yes, that's you, Mike. Welcome.
Amazing talk. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Should I bring Nathan Clark forward as GM of the units?
Yes, Nathan, welcome. Over to you, Mike. Well, Mike, Nathan, however you wish to go through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morning, councillors. We'll take the reports as read and leave it to Nathan and myself to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. There may be a number of questions, so it is open for questions. Councillor Mayling.
Well, relatively simple one. And I did briefly talk with your chair. My understanding is your new compactor is improved the compaction considerably, and that will add life to the airspace of the landfill.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We believe it's increased the compaction by about 150 kilos per cubic metre. So it's quite a significant increase in density of the material.
Yep.
So how much longer will that give us, do you estimate? Because I know there's been a slowdown in the amount of fill that's gone, and that reflects a slowdown in construction probably, but will that add years, 2 years?
So currently the landfill is limited by the life of the consent. So historically it was limited by the volume we had available. So we've now done a bunch of actions, excavating airspace, increasing our compaction, changing the way we consider the cap shape. And we believe that we could get as much as 20 years worth of life out of the landfill with an appropriate consent in place. Obviously it's currently limited by the consent, and we will have to apply for a new consent to extend the life, but as much as 20 years. We think somewhere around 2044 would be the fullest extent that we could get into the landfill.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Further questions? If not, is someone? Councillor Greening.
Thank you, through the chair. As you're probably aware, and I've just circulated this morning, been asking a few questions of the referral reports. I would just like to get a better understanding of the deficits that are referred across these referral reports. So it could be a generic response, I suppose, but and just how that works with what you've alluded to, the fact that they're carrying surpluses and these deficits, I assume, are trying to offset them, or can you just explain what's going on here? Because I would have thought if there's any surpluses, they would be returned to the respective councils to invest in other areas if there are surpluses. So I'm just wondering why we're running deficits to eat up surpluses.
Nathan.
Yeah, through the chair, the way the landfill business unit works is it's a closed account, and so when each year we try to run a budget that is essentially a zero budget. You know, we don't want to make a profit, we don't want to make a loss, and in the event that we make a surplus in 1 year, we try to use up any accumulated surplus over the life of the landfill. So over that current period. So as an example, if we have $910,000 in accumulated surplus, we would then budget for a loss each year or a deficit each year over the next 10 years to pay back that. And what we can see is, depending on accounting actions and post-closure arrangements, and there's a bunch of things that go on, we get quite big swings. A lot of those are based on things that are outside of the actual direct control of the operations. So our way of balancing essentially the budgets and the surpluses by budgeting to try to pay back if we have an accumulated surplus, or recoup more if we have an accumulated loss. And that's essentially a way of trying to balance that. At the present time, we have budgeted for deficits in the future. We've budgeted for 100,000 this coming year in 25-26, 500,000 in the following year, and I think 1 million in the year after that, to pay down the accumulated surpluses. The reason we've budgeted that, and that's outlined in the activity management plan, is because there's a short-term increase if we didn't budget for that in the cost of the gate rate, and we're trying to smooth the gate rate over time to limit the effect on the community. So essentially, we're using that as a mechanism controlling how much we see in the changes of the gate rate.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Mark, so sorry, Mark.
So just as a follow-up, and probably to reassure the public who are trying to get their heads around these reports as well, if anyone wants to entertain reading them, will that result then in any pressure on charges or general rates, or was this effectively revenue neutral?
Yeah, through the chair, the business unit, the landfill business unit, is completely funded by discharge fees. So there is no input from rates into the landfill business unit. we borrow money from the two councils to fund our activities, but we then pay the interest costs and all other aspects of that cost out of the costs for running the landfill, out of the gate rate that comes into the landfill. So there should be no effect on rates, is my understanding.
And no effect on charges?
The charges are set, sorry, through the chair, the charges are set based on our expectations going forward on waste rates and, you know, on all those things. So we try to balance the government's, you know, increasing fees that we pay. We try to balance the changes in the market, and we do that on an, you know, we've projected that out 10 years in the activity management plan. We obviously have to update that every year. We don't expect this to have any adverse effect on charges. It's currently largely in alignment with the charges that we have put in our activity management plan.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Mark? Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Any other speakers or questions? If someone's prepared to move the recommendations, Councillor Walker. Is there a seconder? Councillor Shellcross. Did you wish to speak? Yep.
Yeah, mine's just around obviously what I'm sort of hearing in the trades around dumping of fill. You know, some of the contractors I sort of am working with, obviously the price has gone for the roof. It looks like there's reduction in here. Is that correct? Is there any reduction in that space, or is that only in
Nathan?
For the chair, the landfill business unit has put in place a number of actions to try to assist the management of contaminated soil disposal in the region. So historically, contaminated soil was, you know, particularly low levels of contamination were managed by the private sector. Changes to the regulations, both at national level and local level, have sort of influenced the behaviour there. And a lot of the facilities are no longer accepting material. So there's been quite an area of issue around contaminated soil within our region. The landfill business unit about 2.5 years ago identified that we would like to try to save airspace within the York Valley landfill. And so we put a program in place to divert contaminated soils from York Valley to the mothballed Eves Valley, and to run that as a contaminated soil site rather than a sanitary landfill with, you know, domestic waste. And we obviously did some work there. We upgraded the driveway, we put in a new weighbridge, we did some activities. And on the 1st of October this year, we'll open Eves Valley for accepting what we call Class 3, which is highly contaminated soils, not lowly contaminated soils. That will be at a lesser rate. So waste at York Valley is about 250 plus GSE a tonne. It will be about $164 a tonne at Eves Valley for that contaminated soil. So it's obviously a lot cheaper, but it's still not cheap. You know, if we were to look at a further facility for contaminated Class 4 material, we'd be needing to look at something that was down in the $50 or $60 a tonne rate. So we have looked into that, and at the present time, there's been a significant reduction in demand for that disposal in the region, but we think that that's principally based around the lack of development and land development. And so we've essentially put our program of works on hold while we wait to try and understand what the future demand would look like.
Yeah, because obviously there's lots of moving parts, but I think as long as there's an eye in that space to try and have that reduction, because there's some pretty decent, it obviously all flows back into the cost of living, building houses, etc.
There are a lot of eyes in this space, and a lot of it is again kind of complicated by the national regulation and local administration. But I think Nathan's key point is we want to ensure the landfill is only being used for the stuff that absolutely needs to go there, because it's very valuable space in the future, whether it's York or Eves. The private sector is working hard to come up with solutions for Class 4 and 5, of which we and council staff are helping to work with people to ensure there's appropriate ways of utilising that soil. And we're also working with central government over some of the technicalities around the regulations to ensure that we're not losing a resource in many cases, but very lightly contaminated, arguably not that contaminated soil that has no human health or environmental risk, putting it in landfills and not utilising it for other potentially productive purposes is also not a great outcome. So there is a lot of conversations going on between both the landfill business unit, councils, collectively, the private sector and the government. It's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Next up is another referral report. Mike, Nathan again, so same introduction. So you're well open for questions. So this is on page 127. Anything in relation to this report? Again, if there aren't questions, can someone move, given these are referral reports? Moved Deputy Mayor Bryant, seconded Councillor Mailing. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And then the third report, page 161, moved Deputy Mayor Bryant again.
I'd just like to speak to her, I could miss.
Yeah, I'll just look for a seconder first, if you don't mind. Seconded Councillor Murray.
So through these three reports, you've seen a bit of how the landfill business unit works, and particularly like to acknowledge the work that Nathan does and advising the committee running the landfill business units. Well thought of by the committee, and really appreciate the work that's done there to try and keep this on track, and ongoing work to be done. So no, great effort, Nathan, and appreciate the work you do. So thanks very much.
Thank you. If there's
And your
nothing,
team.
if there's nothing further, I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Mike, you don't need to run away. Oh, it's a regional sewage business unit. Same. It's actually quite, yeah, so well done, Nathan, that little circle kind of Nick, yes. Change of hats. Yeah, very good. Mike, same thing, take as read, referral report again, open for questions or comments. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you through you, Mayor. Thanks, Nathan and Mike. Just in the referral report, or on page 220, we've got the income account for the period to 30th of June 2024. So the performance for that year of the business unit, whilst we produced a net income, we had an unfavourable variance to budget of 1.9 million. So what are the consequences of that unfavourable variance?
Through the chair, I apologise, I don't have that report in front of me, so I can't look at the specific details. The way the regional sewage business unit works is it charges our customers for the activities. We have only four customers. Two of those are the two councils. We charge based on two different aspects. We charge on a fixed basis, so essentially the right to discharge to the facility, and that has as it relates to financing costs and all things that are not related to operations. And that one of the things that influences that significantly is the interest rate. So the way the interest rate is set, I obviously do my business plan. It's done at least 12 months before the start of that year. And that interest rate that I assume in my business plan might be quite different than the interest rate we get at the start of the year. The interest rate is updated on the 30th of June, immediately prior to the start of that financial year. So there can be quite a big difference between the interest rate in the business plan and the interest rate that we are actually using in our finances. And in this last year, that was a significant difference. So what happened is we under recovered about $1 million against the fixed charges. What that does is it basically means that we do not generate the anticipated surplus that we would expect, and so the councils don't get the distribution of that surplus to the same extent as they might have expected. The flip side of that, however, is you didn't pay it in the first place either. So, on one hand, you didn't pay it because we under recovered. On the other hand, you didn't get it back in the surplus that you other do it. You might say, well, why do we have this mechanism for charging and then giving it back? And the reason is the business unit is set up to recover a risk premium from our other industrial customers. So what we do is we charge a premium on the cost of capital that then the industrial customers pay, and that accumulates alongside the two councils and then gets distributed back to the councils. So that there would have been a slight under recovery against those industrial customers, which would not have come back to the council. So that's one side of it. That's the fixed charge side. The other side of it is the variable charge. So what we do is we charge for how much waste is essentially discharged to the facility, and each year we take the previous year's information and we say, well, our costs are X amount, and we divide them by the waste components on that previous year, and that gives us a notional dollar rate per cubic meter or dollar rate per kilogram of BOD, etc. And then we charge through the year based on that. So if we have a very dry year and 1 year, we would then divide the next year's stuff by a smaller number, which would mean that the cost rate would go up. Or if we have a very wet year, that would obviously go down. The problem we had in this past year is that the 2022 year, which a lot of stuff was based on, was a very wet year, but last year was not. So we had a very different, a big difference in the recovery of that volumetric. So we have talked to our customers. So one of the things we've talked to them is, as all 4 customers as their operating representatives, to see whether we should try to reduce that variability by using an average or a nominal model year rather than the previous year, because that obviously can vary quite a lot. And that's something we are investigating at the present time to try to reduce the variability within that. So,
if I may, so that was a very thorough explanation. Thank you. I guess maybe my question might then be for Mike. So given that result, does that impact in any way in terms of TDC's annual plan for the 24-25 financial year?
I guess it will, through the chair, I guess it'll, at the end of the year, yes, when we do the wrap up, we might have to pay extra. So yes, but I assume that will then carry over into the next annual plan, and we'll take account for it when we do the following year.
We should.
Yeah. I might need to clarify slightly. So the one thing I missed out of that explanation, sorry, it was full, but it wasn't as full as it could have been, was that at the variable rate aspect of our charging, we charge and we go under. What happens at the end of that year is that we do a reconciliation. And so on the variable charge, we never make a overarching loss, because we actually do what we call a wash up. And it basically, we zero that out, and the customers either get the money back or they have to pay more to zero out the variable charge stuff. So the net loss would be discussed, but we'd have a wash up, or we call it a wash up at the end of the year. So what that always does is tallies up that variable aspect of the charging on the operations to zero again at the end of the year, never carries forward. The piece that would adversely affect is the fixed charge, because that doesn't get tallied up, and that reduces the amount of surplus or the distribution to the councils essentially.
Yeah, I'll maybe just ask a slightly different question, I think, than so coming back to you, Mike. So, I mean, we have an annual plan in place already for the 24-25 financial year. We've set the rates, we've got budgets, we are out there doing things. So this financial result from the Sewerage business unit for the year to June 2024, which is past, does that alter in any way that plan that we already have in place?
Well, it depends when we get that information, but yes, it would do. Because if we have to pay extra into it, then that's an extra cost we've got to finance from that budget.
Or if we were budgeting for a surplus return and it was less than or more than. So we need to understand what we have budgeted for, which clearly we will get as part of the discussion around the annual plan next year.
Or an impact on the annual plan that we're already delivering for this year.
Yeah, but there's nothing we can't change if there isn't. We can't change the annual plan for this year. But yes, if it has an impact, it's going to be reflected and have to be either recovered or not as the case may be. But it depends on what we've budgeted.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Through Mr. Mayor, the impact will be noted in the activity balance that gets carried forward into the next financial year. So an adverse variance for whatever reason within the activity this year driven by the NRSBU will be reflected in an opening balance that is either a larger deficit or a lower surplus, which will impact the budget for the following year. So this will be taken into account when council considers what the appropriate budgets are for the 25-26 financial year, which you'll be looking at in the next 6 months.
Thank you. Someone has it been?
I've got a question if I may.
Yep.
So thank you, Nathan. Just Nathan, I guess there's more for you. It's slightly operational, but there's an impact on governance. Just the work you've been doing around the estuary at Wakatu Drive and the end of the Richmond deviation and some other at Beach Road, is that pretty much on time and on cost, and is there likely to be any further disruption or additional costs in relation to that work?
Through the chair, we've been notified. So that's what we consider our regional rising main duplication project. It's been going on for some years. That we consider that project essentially on track. It's essentially on budget. We have been notified of a small request for variation regarding a change, unexpected circumstance. We haven't evaluated that, which is very recent. It's not. We wouldn't expect it to be material in the overarching scheme of the project. Currently, we'd expect that project to be finished sometime in the early part of next year, available for accepting wastes from Tasman. So at that point, we would expect to have capacity to accept Tasman's current and, just future wastes for the next 20 years.
Thank you. And so does that have any implications for the pipe across the estuary? Will that have capacity to take the extra capacity?
So currently, all the modelling suggests that we have capacity through the current pipes, and I say pipes. We have two separate pipes across the estuary: the new 800 PE and the old concrete, to take around about 1,500 litres per second, which is about the same capacity as the inlet acceptance capacity of the treatment plant. We have a program investigating the condition of the old concrete pipe to ensure that that's in an appropriate condition. There's no issues with it, but I mean that's just good practice to look at these things, and essentially we'll be in a position to know that we've got a good reticulation network for the next 15 or 20 years at that point.
Happy to move. So move, Councillor Mailing. Yep.
So I'm happy to move the motion. It's a pleasure to work with Nathan and his team, and if you get a chance to visit the plant out there, it's considerably different than what it was some 6 years ago, when I think I became chair, and the resilience and there's a new building out there, and the way we're working with iwi and to hopefully divert wastewater in the future to other processes is a credit to Nathan and his team, and I hope it goes well going forward. And with local water's done well, the structure will possibly change in the future, and we're aware of that. But this plant is operating so much better than it was when I first went on the board, and the compliments from the commissioner that did 2 hearings, one in relation to the plant and then one in relation to Rabbit Island, were very favourable the second time round. The first time round, she said we'd sweated the asset. So she had a look 2 years later, and that was a pleasure to have that. So thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Councillor Mailing. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Yeah, it's carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. You can leave. Next up, we've got the recommendation from the Joint Regional Pest Management Committee on the Regional Pest Management Plan, and Gwynnie Coleman is in your name, so welcome. So this is on page 336. Welcome. Over to you.
Kia ora. So this report is to provide the recommendations of the Regional Pest Management Joint Committee and seek adoption of the amended Regional Pest Management Plan. So the Regional Pest Management Joint Committee is responsible for the development and review of the joint plan, which is a plan between Tasman District Council and Nelson City Council. And the Regional Pest Management Committee was formed in March 2023 for the specific purpose of undertaking a partial review of the RPMP and making recommendations to both councils. So this partial review considered changes to the RPMP related specifically to blue passion flower, bone seed, moth plant pempus, sabella, Vietnamese parsley, water celery, pest conifers including wilding conifers, and feral and stray cats. So I'll just run through the process we've been through to get to this point. So the number of key stakeholders we included in early consultation as requests from the Joint Committee. So this included government agencies, adjoining council, sector groups and companies, and the community organisations, as well as iwi. Feedback from this early consultation formed the partial review proposal, and this went out to public consultation. So these groups were also invited to further engage in the public submission. So we did receive further submissions from a number of them. The proposed rule changes were approved by the committee to go to public consultation December 2023. Consultation ran for a month. In February 2024, we received 101 submissions. 12 submitters spoke in hearings on 27th of May 24. And deliberations were held 11th of July 2024, and the recommendations from the Joint Committee are listed completely in this report that you've received today. And I understand that it's a bit complicated, so I'm going to step you through what those changes actually are. So today we're seeking adoption of those recommended changes, but also to confirm the minutes of that final 11th of July meeting as the committee is disbanded following the adoption of this reviewed plan. So attachment 2 is the edited version of the RPMP, which brings all of these changes into the plan. There's still some minor edits to be included. That sort of includes updating maps and numbering and grammar edits, so they're not major changes that affect the rules. So a quick overview of the changes. Blue passion flower and moth plant are now eradication pests across the district, both regions. Bone seed is eradication outside of Nelson Port Hills and sustained control within Nelson Port Hills. Pempus is sustained control in 2 sites in Golden Bay, that's Aorere Valley and the Whanganui Inlet up to Pupona. Vietnamese parsley and water celery is sustained control. Sabella, the rules been updated to align with Marlborough's rules so that we've got consistency across the top of the south, and the purpose is to control the main pathway of marine pests coming into the region. So we will be requiring vessels entering Tasman Nelson region to have a fouling level of 2 or less, unless they're entering for the purpose of hauling out or for emergency purposes. But local boats are excluded from that rule unless they leave the region and come back after 3 days. So won't be chasing our local boats. Feral cats. These rules are specific to areas of high biodiversity where we're able to enforce the rules under current resourcing and are intended to be complementary to the proposed cat management bylaws that are currently in train in both Tasman and Nelson. We received the most submissions related to cats. All were either in support or requesting more control than proposed. But it is a key point of Biosecurity Act that you need to be able to fully fund your enforcement. So we're quite specific about where we can bring those rules in into the RPMP. So new rules for feral cats is within a SANANID site-led program. Any cat must be microchipped and desexed, and no person can release a cat into the wild. Within the able Tasman private enclaves, no person shall release a cat into the wild. in Waimea Inlet, there's already rules for feral cats, and we've extended that to include Bell Island. And Nelson has high value sites listed, which where no person can release a cat into the wild, and no person shall shelter or feed feral or stray cats. We did receive a number of requests to extend these rules into a number of other parts of the district, and the requests often covered private land or areas where it would directly impact landowners that hadn't been a part, it was a new rule and it would be imposing a new rule that hadn't been in the consultation process. So we've held those for the next full review to be able to really work with those landowners who would be impacted. And I think if the bylaw comes through, generally those rules will be overtaken through the bylaw. And finally, wild and conifers, which received the more complex submissions, but it's worth noting that the majority, 78%, were in support of the changes. So there's 10 species listed: Bishop's pine, contorta, Corsican pine, mountain pine, European larch, maritime pine, Mexican weeping pine, ponderosa pine, Scots pine, western white pine, and then the wilding versions of radiata and Douglas fir, which are captured in these rules. There's 5 rules that are region-wide, 2 are specific to within operational areas, and 3 are outside of those operational areas. So these rules are targeted at early intervention in protected areas not yet infested with wilding. So a key biosecurity principle is get them before they start to spread. It's much cheaper, much easier to ultimately control the problem. So each rule includes an option of a negotiated management agreement, recognising that we have all sorts of complex situations potentially out there. So yeah, we can negotiate with any kind of complex case. So Rule A is a clear land rule, focuses on eradication of pest conifers before they can spread. So outside of operational areas, occupiers need to destroy pest conifers prior to cone bearing unless they're in an urban or high intensity land area. Rule B is a planted forest rule. This manages spread from forest plantations over 1 hectare. And note that the wording of this rule is taken directly from the forestry company's joint submission, and their suggested wording of the rule, so we've taken that exact wording. So from the 1st of July 2024, occupiers of forest plantations are liable for the cost of removal of any new wilding conifers present on adjoining land within 200 metres of their boundary. And where the adjoining landowner is proactively managing their wildings. This rule is essentially a boundary rule. So if you think of the way we manage our gorse boundary rules, it's basically the same theory in how we would enforce it. And then a pest agent conifer rule that manages potential seed sources that may impact neighbours and halt the spread of wildings from the likes of lone trees or shelter belts. So a similar theory, so occupiers must destroy a pest agent conifer on their land where the adjoining occupier is taking reasonable steps to control the wilding conifers on their land, and that evidence of wilding spread is clearly attributable to the pest agent on their neighbour's property. And then the final 2 rules are for operational areas. So an operational area is a place where, so we've named them Mount Richmond Management Unit, Tarakohe Hill, Able Tasman and Golden Bay. And they're only triggered once the operational area is deemed complete. So it needs to have had full control and about 2 to 3 rounds of maintenance. And this is really, it's meant to be protecting investment of national funding. And under the current national funding, with which we've taken quite a hit in terms of a reduction in funding, it's unlikely that these following 2 rules are going to be triggered in the next 4 to 5 years. Potentially will be if we get the appropriate funding. So Rule D is a maintain the gains rule. So essentially, once your land has been cleared, that you're responsible for picking up any wilding that pops up. And a good neighbour rule, or a better way to think of it, is a bind the crown rule. Good neighbour rules are the only way that you can bind the crown into also following RPMP rules. So it's a 200 metre good neighbour rule inside those operational areas. And attachment 1, which outlines steps 70 to 75. So this is a requirement under the Biosecurity Act that council is satisfied that we've followed the Biosecurity Act, and those are sections 70 to 75, which allows us to produce or amend a regional pest management plan. The sections outline how you have to step through the proposal, make decisions on the pest species to be included, how to decide on appropriate rules, ensure you follow the direction and national policy direction for pest management, have appropriate consultation and decision making, and provide the right information within the final plan. The original plan in 2019, when it was written, followed all of these steps, and that was all ticked off. So we've just gone through and made sure that we haven't gone against any of those steps. And so the only difference is that we've added in these new species and that we've followed the same process. I do need to highlight to you that there are minor changes that we've taken in the original plan, which are editing grammar type spelling ones, and there's been a species name change for koi carp and water celery. So council has been requested to confirm that you're satisfied that sections 70 to 75 of the Biosecurity Act have been met, and that the final request is to be able to notify submitters and the public of its submission.
Thank you, Winnie. Are there any questions? Councillor Kennelly.
Maybe not a question so much, but as a member of the joint committee, I am absolutely stoked with the amount of effort you guys have put in and the camaraderie working as a joint committee. That's no mean feat to get a lot of technical, scientific people together, singing from the same song sheet, and keeping them focused, which you've done. And so there's a lot of work, as you've just heard, gone on to getting us this far. And I'd say congratulations to you for what you've done, and the team behind you. We're not here today. And if I may, I'd like to recommend that we accept this report.
So does that mean you'd like to move the resolution?
Sorry, I would like to move I'll get it right one day. I'd like to move the resolution.
Yeah, thank you. So move Councillor Canamont. I've got a couple of speakers, Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Greening and Councillor Butler. Is someone willing to stick in? Second, Councillor Butler, I'll come back to you to speak. So Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Greening, Councillor Butler, Councillor Walker.
Thank you through you, Mia. Thanks, Connie, and thanks for taking the time to go through that explanation. I think that was really helpful. I do have a couple of questions. I mean, you know, we know that, you know, wilding pines, yeah, it's a big problem in terms of, you know, New Zealand as a country, and we want to make progress. I guess I'm just interested, as part of your work and thinking about making the step and the plan, are there any unintended consequences? I mean, how have you, I mean, it's a change in approach, puts onus on, you know, landowners. In terms of your kind of like risk assessment of the plan, was there anything that you're just concerned about in that area?
Through the chair, it's so wilding pines is a massive problem. It has, if we were to fully fund the removal of our wilding pines in this district just on public land, it would cost us millions. So we're really in that, and what we're trying to do here is stop the spread from now. We're really trying to halt it so that we don't create a problem in 20 years' time. that's the purpose. Because they're new rules for the plan, we haven't had any wild and fine rules. There may be some situations that come out of the woodwork that we haven't considered in this process because we haven't seen the data before, and that is why we've put a clause in each rule that says an alternative is an agreed management plan, so that if we have, so we can work through individual situations and understand the consequences. We're not trying to put a huge burden on an individual landowner out of nowhere, trying to be fair on that because they are new rules, but that's why that's in there. So we can come up with a negotiated agreement. It may be that beyond, it may take them 10 years to make the rule or something like that. But the intention is to prevent spread from now. Yeah.
If I could. And so how do you propose to communicate the plan and to communicate with landowners?
So we will go through a bit of an education plan. So we've already drafted up a number of these. We're mimicking ECAN. So ECAN have brought in a number of these rules. We're not the first ones to bring in these rules. So and so they've got lots of things we can copy. And we've come up with, especially the wild and fine rules, they are complex and hard to get your head around. So we've drawn up sort of diagrams and pictures of how to work through those. And we're not going to go out and start enforcing it tomorrow. We're going to step through an education program. That's how we've always approached all of our biosecurity, is education first. And step through the rules and help people meet those rules before we do enforcement. We do very few notices of direction and formal enforcement in Tasman, and that we intend to continue that with these. Yeah.
So I'm still not sure how we communicate. Sorry, if I may. I'm just still not sure how you're going to communicate with landowners.
So our current program of work, which we do through education, of putting things in newspapers and Facebook posts and talking directly to affected landowners, going to public groups, like going to the AMP shows and getting out and educating people. Yeah, and when the rule, if we receive a complaint, then we can directly talk to that person that's affected. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Greening.
Yeah, thank you. Very thorough report and good concise summary. So thank you for that. If there's any suggestion, it would be really nice to have those kind of really nice concise summaries at the start of the report. I think we'd find that's really useful. Just in relation to what's being proposed in this, do any of these changes, and obviously some of them involve extended activities, do they have an impact on any future TDC budgeted spending or resourcing requirements? And if they do, how much and when?
Through the chair, we have taken this as a limited review or a partial review and used the current budget that's in the LTP. So the budget hasn't increased, and we've done that within our means, and that's why we haven't taken every single suggestion that our submitters asked for, because we don't have the budget for that. So no.
And do you envisage this putting pressure on council revisiting these budgets to increase them? Acknowledging already that we've already set these budgets and you are working within what we've already set.
Potentially as we go through and learn more about these, but we would address that through the LTP process, and that we do have a full review of this plan. So this is halfway through the plan. So in about 2027, we will be looking at a full review, and we will take into account what we've learned from any kind of cost impacts that we haven't predicted at that point.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to be able to second this, and yeah, it has been a long process, and I'd just like to thank once as well. I'd like to thank the staff and the work, and I think particularly working with the forestry industry and being able to work in step with them has been a big thing and made things a lot easier. So I do have a question, and that is just about the possibility of funding for future from the government for future conifer control, wilding control. And you did say that you don't think there's going to be much more, but can you confirm that, or have you got any information more about that, seeing you're closer to it than we are?
So the current budget, we saw a real increase in budget through the Jobs for Nature program, and that's now come to an end. So we saw a really good increase in control, and you'll notice that if you go for a walk through Mount Richmond, I hope, lots of dead trees. And we do have so that's now reduced to baseline funding, which was the same baseline funding that we had before Jobs for Nature, which is 10 million a year across all of New Zealand, which is not a lot. And yeah, at this point, it seems like that is the current budget.
Right, so how that 10 million, yes, it's not a lot, and we're small in the scheme of things, would we be able to access any effective amount from that that's going to make any difference to our region?
So Mount Richmond Management Unit is a funded unit through that national program, and it receives, we haven't had confirmation of budgets, any budgets this year from MPI, but it should be around 160 to 190,000 a year, which is enough for maintenance control of what we've already done up in Mount Richmond.
Okay, and the Tarakohe Hill Biodiversity Group would need to be doing their own, accessing their own funding.
Correct. Right. Unfortunately, MPI only did one round of community fund, community projects that were funded. So they received that initial hit, and then they haven't offered that again. But yeah, which is unfortunate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you through Mayor, and I thank you for, as already been explained, a very good brief, understanding of where this is at. And I understand that's a management plan, and I thank you for letting us know that you're going to communicate, and your first step is educate. But I just wonder, when the education part hasn't made a difference, and then we go into the regulating it or enforcement, and I know that Councillor Greening and to a point Councillor Butler has mentioned it, but I sit here wondering about the cost and how we actually implement it if people aren't going to change behaviours through educating. So 3 things that sprang out when you were speaking before is around, when vessels enter into our moana, our sea area, how do we regulate? And how do we work out how many layers of antifoul they have and what they bring and don't bring into our area? The second one was about the feral cats being released. People are releasing cats all the time. How does this management plan actually eliminate that happening? And my third one was around the good neighbour rule. How do we work with that? How do we regulate what a good neighbour is or isn't? And where does the policing come into bad neighbours at war? Why does that filter in here? Just my few of my questions, and how is any of that funded? Thanks.
Okay. I quickly wrote them down. So vessels, Biosecurity Act allows us to recover costs. So we don't have the ability to give fines or those sorts of things. So it gives you the ability to enforce the rule. So and the the step is we can give a notice of direction, which asks the landowner to comply. If they don't comply, and that's generally that they do. That's very rare that it goes beyond this. You can then act on default. So that's when we either get a contractor or one of our staff to go and do the work, and then we send the invoice for that to the landowner, and they are required to pay that. And if they don't pay it, really down the track, it ends up as a lien on the property. So the Biosecurity Act's quite strong in that process. So yeah, if we're dealing with in those rare circumstances, we do have the ability to recover costs from the individual landowner. For vessels, we already have a Sabella program, so it's an existing rule that we manage, and we would this additional rule would be managed in the same way. So as the boat comes in, we do a summer dive survey. So we fund a summer dive survey in conjunction with Nelson City Council and Marlborough District Council, where we go out in high use times and dive vessels and have a look what's underneath. And that's the same theory. If they either have Sabella on their hull or they have a really dirty hull now, that we can ask them to then go and be lifted and cleaned, and we send them to Nelson for that, and that is a user pays. So the vessel owner would pay for the boat to be cleaned. We also track boats through AIS, so it's a kind of a GPS system that's on boats, and you can track where they're coming from, and we pay attention to high risk ports. So there's particular areas in New Zealand, north of Auckland, and Littleton particularly, are really kind of what we consider dirty places that we keep an eye on boats that come from there. They do. If you see any of our boats that we have found with Sabella, they've typically come from, in fact, they've all come from either north of Auckland or Littleton. So we kind of keep an eye on that, and we just do our best, really, in that sense. We can't follow every single boat, and we try and intercept where we can. Feral cats, it's difficult to manage, and that's why we've focused on areas where there's already a public group, a group, either a community group or DOC or another local group that's already working on a feral cat issue in that area, and we've built the rules to support them. So we haven't started a new site. We've already got people there working, and the rule is there to help them. So if they note that someone is doing something that's really not helping the issue by releasing cats, we have something we can enforce, because at the moment we can't actually do anything about it. And yeah, it would be impossible to monitor across the whole region. Just, too difficult. And a good neighbour rule is actually a rule written in the biosecurity section, on the Biosecurity Act section, the national the policy direction for, and it's I guess it's an unusual name, but it's a good name. It's a specific rule. It's a rule you can place on a neighbour, and to be a good neighbour, you are not spreading pests, a named pest, onto your neighbour's property. And so we do have a current rule like that. We think of gorse. It's the one that we enforce a lot at the moment. And our current rule, so if you are keeping your land clear of gorse, and your neighbour has gorse right up to your boundary, and it's then spreading onto your property, then we can come and ask that neighbour to clear their land back 10 metres for gorse, to stop it being a problem on your property. That's a good neighbour rule, and that's where we step in if they haven't managed to come to that agreement together. So hopefully we never hear from people, but we do. And so, for forestry, it's the same theory. Under legislation, the Crown, so DOC in this instance, can only be held to regional pest management plan rules if it's a good neighbour rule. So we have to name a good neighbour rule to ensure that that DOC have to also comply with keeping their land clear of pines, and that's sort of the purpose of that rule, is why I refer to it as a bind the Crown rule. That's a better way to think of it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, thank you. I couldn't see my hand earlier. I just wanted to thank you for the report. I just wanted to check what's it could be quite onerous on people clearing their land, especially the pine being a particular issue. What role is the industry playing in this? Because it's essentially a problem of their making. So our ratepayers are having to clean up the mess. What role does forestry have in this?
So that is where we've brought in the rule B, which is specific to plantation forestry rules. So that's asking the forestry company, or the forestry owner, not necessarily a company, can be an individual, the forestry owner to pay for clearance of up to 200 metres into their neighbour's boundary. And that is we're working under the Biosecurity Act in this sense. We only have certain powers that we can use under the Biosecurity Act, and you need to be very clear that the problem tree, that wilding that is coming into the neighbour's property, is from that plantation, and that's sort of where we've come to the 200 metre. It's a bit of a guess, you know. We know that seed can go a long way, but how you actually then bring that back to a specific plantation becomes really hard. So that's where that rule has come in. To give the forestry companies credit, the local forestry companies are already doing a lot of this. So they already work with their neighbours and try and make sure that their plantation isn't directly spreading into the neighbour's property. And a lot of these wilding issues are legacy issues. So actually a number of our pine plantations were planted by the government. So we are dealing with legacy issues that, hence why we have a national funded program. Try and deal with that.
Thank you. I think you touched on the fact that the wilding pine rules are quite complex, because I was asked to explain them to a group of people, and oh, lovely jubbly. I went and got them and got the little maps and all that and started, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this. So then I asked a couple of staff, and they came to try and explain to me, and that didn't really work. And that may be because I'm just thick. So then another staff came, and eventually I think we got. But it is actually the combination of all the rules and how they might apply in different circumstances and the maps. It is quite complex. So in terms of the education and the information, it's going to be really important that certainly before enforcement becomes an issue, that people are really clear where they fit into that range of different rules that apply, particularly around the wilding pine thing. So yeah. If there's nothing further, I will put the resolution. It's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We'll do time. No, we'll break. No, oh, Jamie, no, we will. You're here. No, Jamie, sit down. Stay. This should be quick. This should be quick. So we'll do temporary road closure, then we'll have a quick break, then we'll come back.
Thank you. I'm willing to take the report as read and answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Councillor Dowler and then Deputy Mayor Bryant and then.
Happy to move.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to second. Jamie, just had one question, if I may, and it's just slightly off target, but off the report. Just in relation to the Matakitaki Road and the Westland Car Club event we normally get similar application about this time. Do you know where that is, or has that been?
So that has been received, and it's going through a process that'll come to a future meeting.
Thank you. Other than that, happy to support these resolution for these two.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you. I know there's a degree of eye rolling over this, but I'm prepared to vote for the second resolution, but not the first, because I just feel that a message needs to be sent that that we do consider the emissions as regards these car rallies. I appreciate that in the scheme of things, it's not a lot, but you know, by endorsing car rallies, council can be seen to be endorsing, you know, petrol car emissions. So I would like to be able to vote for 2.2 and not for 2.1. So what about how we do?
Unfortunately, the mover and seconder have moved both,
Right.
so you'll just have to make that judgment call. I'm not sure if we measure the emissions of both, given everyone who goes to the Christmas parade and drives to and from, and all the petrol and diesel powered vehicles that go down the main street crawling along for hours. Which one would come out on top? I don't know, but I know this is the conversation we have had previously around road closures for car rallies, but we are here to debate the road closure, not the activity of car rallying. So it's been moved in Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you. Through the mayor. What costs are to us for road closure? And do we recoup them all off the applicant?
Jamie.
Yeah, so we receive a deposit from any applicants, and so any costs that we incur, so the cost to put it in any newsline or advertising, and the staff time involved, we recover from the applicant. So there's no net cost to the council from these.
And the second question is the repairs to the road or any damage, I presume that's included as part of the deposit, and
That's correct. Yeah, we do pre and post surveys from the rally events, and if there's any maintenance work needed, that's all in the agreement when they make their application to us.
Okay, thank you. And I know for Christmas parade, it's certainly the cost of the road closure, the traffic matter there, so is eye-wateringly high. So it's always been a challenge for those running those parade events particularly on main streets and state highways, which is the case in Motueka. So it's been moved and seconded. No, Chris, give and then the shush. So I'll now put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, it's carried. So we'll take a quick break, 10 minutes, come back at 11, and we'll reconvene. And the next item is the Berthing Bollard at Port Tarakohe.
Are we on? I can't hear anything.
Be able to hear. So there was a brief introduction to the IC. Can you hear me, Councillor Greening?
I can now. Yep.
Okay, all good. So Richard gave a brief introduction to the item in relation to the expenditure on the Bollard at Port Tarakohe, and it's now open for questions. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm happy to move it. I do have a question though. I mean, when I read through it, it just looked to me like a bit of a change in scope of the original work. And my question is, should it require a whole report to come to council? Do our current delegations not allow you to exercise those delegations and deal with that change in scope? Because, you know, just seemed unnecessary to me.
I think in the normal circumstances, you're correct. When you have, like we have a risk amount in our projects and we do allocate that. But in this particular situation, we came to council for a specific approval for every expenditure of 331,000. And that was for specific tasks, made savings on that. And because of those savings, it was actually quite convenient that we're able to utilise those. And I felt I had to come back to you to get approval for spending that money outside what you had approved that over expenditure for previously. I felt that was slightly outside my delegation, so that's why it's here. But yeah, I did vacillate over that, but I thought, no, I'll make a call.
All right, well, I mean, I'm all for efficiency and effectiveness. So if we don't need to be doing those sorts of things, then don't, but all good.
Sorry, move Councillor Mackenzie as a seconder. I've got Councillor Greening on the list to speak. Seconded Councillor Dowler. Councillor Greening.
Oh, thanks. Look, I welcome the transparency of this document. So thank you very much for that, Richard. It's appreciated. I'm sure the public appreciate it as well. And it also gives a little bit of transparency around the project itself. And appreciate that what's been done is effectively revenue neutral within the project, and probably acknowledging the fact that if the bollards hadn't been done, the funds would come back to council and would be spending them somewhere else. So I'm supportive of you doing this, and I think it's good. And I really don't have any opposition to it, having read the report. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, I too want to endorse Richard Kirby for being transparent with us. And I'm a little bit different from Councillor Mackenzie in that this was a specific task, and this dolphin berthing bollard is slightly different from the scope. So as a councillor and in my governance role, I appreciate you coming back to us for us to have a, to sign off. We can't stop it because in retrospect it's already been done. But I believe that's my role, that you should come in and front those conversations. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Just briefly, Nick, when this was discussed at the Port Tarakohe Advisory Group, there was some issues raised about whether or not it would be in the way. So can we just clarify that for the 4 other vessels?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. The original discussion about a dolphin, which incidentally at the time had been costed at $300,000, was a navigation hazard. This new bollard is, I guess, right next to the ramp, so it's in no one's way.
Thank you. Anything further? If not, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Next up, we've got amendments to the delegations register, Lee. Page 520.
Kia ora koutou. Through the chair, this is the first of a number of papers that are coming to you over the next few months in relation to delegations. As you may be aware, for some time, the legal team have been working on a review of our current delegations and what they look like and how they're used by staff and how they're viewed by the general public. As part of this review, we've identified a program called Loco Delegations, which is mentioned in the report. Loco Delegations is a program created by Algam for councils to manage, among other things, their delegations. As part of this review, the legal team identified Loco Delegations as having a lot of potential, but it needed some work. So we as a team and a council, with other councils and Elgin, spearheaded an approach to make the local delegation software more fit for purpose at a significantly reduced cost than all of the councils who use it having to do their own reviews of their delegations register. So just as a bit of context around that, we initially got a quote for an external lawyer to review our delegations, and that was going to be about $60,000. We currently pay local delegations approximately $3,000 a year, and that includes a quarterly review of new and changes to legislation by Simpson Grierson, one of the largest law firms in New Zealand. So it's a bit of a win for us and a bit of a cost saving, and when it's all implemented, it will be significantly easier for staff and the general public to see exactly where the delegations sit. It's created a bit of work for us as a team, because the way that local delegations records delegations is section by section. So, but the way that we currently record in our register might be, this whole part is delegated to these people. So we haven't had to go through and set out really clearly who's got authority to do each individual part. Hence why we are bringing it to you in chunks, because there's a lot coming and there's lots of changes coming. I'll note that I have received some feedback on the report already from the members. The next report, we will try and make it a lot clearer what might be a sort of a new delegation, what is a change to the description in local delegations, and what is simply like a role change. I also note that there's a change to the resolution highlighted up on the screen, just ensuring that the Chief Financial Officer also has the authority to sign off on elected member expense claims. Other than that, I am available to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Leith. Open for questions, comments, moving and or seconding. Councillor Greening.
Through the chair, thank you, Leith, for engaging in the discussion that we've been having, and appreciate you taking on board some feedback. There's a lot of confusion, I think, and we've seen some emails from the public who clearly are reading our agendas and getting a little uncomfortable with what's going on. I have to say, I was a bit red flagged when I saw the words used additional delegations, and it wasn't really clear what was going on here. Now, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, there's three things going on here. We've got what I'd call a structural change. So we're moving content from the old register, if I can call it that, into a digital system that has required some structural changes to where information is located. As you've already acknowledged, there's some title changes that are part of this. And I pointed out that the word finance manager may need to be updated, and I assume that's what that change that you put up on screen, which I can't see, is about. If it isn't, then I think that needs to be added and as amended or something, words in the resolution to take up that change. And then I understood from our conversation that some wording changes were made to the delegation for clarity. But my concern with that is these aren't really well shown in the report. And I think it's what you talk about in terms of moving content from the old management delegation section in the old report and being forced to break it out under the new structure in the digital system under Act groupings. And while that's shown in your report, it's not clear in the report where the clarification changes have come about. So I think it's important that we see those. Appreciate that you probably don't have the resources at the moment, given some key members are away or on holiday or something. But I think there should be a report back to council showing what these changes are, so that we are very clear that there have been no unintended scope changes to delegations, which I think we should be aware of before we start approving all this. So I would ask that there is a report back to this council highlighting these clarification changes to ensure they are not scope changes. I'd also, that's just my, I'll let you speak to that one first before I ask my next questions.
Through the chair, look, thank you for your feedback, councillor. My understanding is once we've done, so we're doing these in chunks for you, and at the very end there will be an opportunity to review the register as a whole. So I'm happy if you are willing to wait to review it as a whole, adopt it as a whole, or if you'd like me to either circulate or do a subsequent report, I'm happy with that as well.
Yeah, I think just because you're indicating there's going to be a lot of change, I think we need to get our heads around just this one here and to be reassured there hasn't been any scope change. That can be circulated to councillors. That would be fantastic.
So rather than wait to the end, I think the suggestion is that post this, if it is approved, that we get that advice back prior to the next, as opposed to wrapping it all up at the end.
Yeah.
So if you're happy with that approach, that's what, and that will be included as a number 8, is it 9? 9 effective, or actually maybe 8 and 8 becomes 9.
So thank you. So that's my first round of questions. So my understanding is right where we've gone there. So that's great. My other question just relates around 2 other questions really, and it's for me to understand better, why did we separate out the single manager role into 2 manager roles? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, is this going to cost us more? But why did we do it? What was the purpose of doing this? And then I'll come to my third question.
Please.
Through the chair, so this is the splitting of the Legal and Democracy Services Manager to the now General Counsel and Governance Manager role. So the rationale behind that was each of those 2 teams has a really specific function and quite a broad function across council, really. And it was considered that it was too much for one individual to do, and their focus was pulled in too many ways. So there has been a change proposal, and now you're looking at the new General Counsel and the new Governance Manager over behind the screen. But yeah, that was the rationale. I mean, there is an increase in the salary budget, I understand. And maybe Steve can speak to that more.
Steve. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there is an increase in salary budget. It's not a number that I have to hand at the moment, and depending on the nature of how I might explain that to members, it might not be something that I wanted to do in public session. But we can find that information if we're required to. I'd also add to what Lee said, in that we found from not only the consultation process, but also feedback we got from the previous Legal and Democracy Services Manager, was that it was the requirements of the role, the different requirements of the role were meaning that she was able to, excuse me, was meaning that she was able to spend far less time on the legal part of her role because of the responsibilities that she had for democracy services. And as councillors will be aware, the legal spend that we've got is considerably higher when we need to go out and get external legal advice. And it was felt that by having a staff member concentrate fully on legal matters and a staff member concentrating fully on democracy services managers, that we would be able to rationalise some of our spend, not necessarily cost neutral, but rationalise our spend and be more effective nonetheless.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've probably got some thoughts about that, but I'm on the other side. I mean, functions can be changed without requiring more managers. You just separate the function. But anyway, we'll park that one. My other question just relates, and this is, I suppose, a concern that's festering in the general public, and so I think it's important to ask. And we've had a few emails from the public, so I'm going to just get some clarification around what I think is possibly behind it. And again, it relates in a way to the separation of the two roles. I think there is a concern here that the legal counsel role is going to be doing stuff, and every time they do something as a legal counsel, as they action their delegation, it's going to be subject to legal privilege. Now, as I understand it, legal privilege is only asserted over legal advice, not performing functions of delegation. Can you clarify how you see legal privilege being asserted and how it relates to the delegations of the legal counsel now, or the general counsel?
Through your chair, I mean, you're absolutely right. Just because a person happens to be a lawyer doesn't mean everything they touch is legally privileged. For something to be legally privileged, it has to be either legal advice or guidance, or in relation to a potential ongoing legal matter. So, you know, if I end up using a financial delegation and there's a rationale behind that, that rationale is not necessarily going to be legally privileged just because there's a lawyer involved.
Thank you. And just returning to an earlier question, the finance manager change, is that what you're proposing with the CFO change, or is this something that has to be done in addition?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, could you clarify your question?
Yes, that's the one. Yep. So you've struck out finance manager and you replaced it with CFO. That's what I was trying to drive at. Fantastic. Thank you for showing that. Excellent. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Groningen. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. Has it been moved yet? Right. I'm happy to move the resolution with that amendment. But I do have one question. Please, I'm just wondering, so when we get to the end of this project and loco delegations is all up and running and fit for our business, will it be the case that there will be greater transparency to the public around our delegations than there is currently?
Through the chair, there is a public view of our loco delegations project that will be put on our website. And it will be more transparent in the sense that it's easier for people to navigate. At the moment, our current delegations register, I understand, is online, but it's, 80 odd pages of, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Canamont and Councillor Canamont indicated you wish to speak.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Simpson Grierson does a lot of work already for us. So you'd have to suggest they're a lawyer firm of choice. So do they have a conflict of interest with some of this stuff? Secondly, as you mentioned at the beginning, that we're getting this work done very cheaply at $3K a year opposed to 60. That's a hell of a lot of difference. Where does that difference come in the way of you're instructing the work to be carried out, or has someone already got information that they can use? You don't have to train another company up.
Through the chair, so Simpson Grierson is currently one of our legal providers on our panel. I'll note that we are currently going through a procurement process for that panel. Their role in this is to provide legal advice and guidance to ALGM, who produce loco delegations, And the benefit of that is then rolled out to all of the councils for us to accept or not. So there isn't a conflict with Simpson Grafton working for both us and Elgin. Grafton as a firm works across many local authorities around the country. Your second point about the cost of it, I note that $3,000 includes the cost of the software for the year. That includes, so it's the cost of the software and quarterly reviews of new legislation by Simpson Grafton. And the benefit of that, I mean, that's a saving across councils' legal budgets, which would have to dip in and pay $60,000 for a one-off review and then significantly more going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, Councillor Ellis, then Councillor Murray.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillor Greening has asked us to have a report brought back which shows if there are any scope changes. And my question is, so if this goes through right now today, and then you come back with a report saying actually it has changed the scope, where does that leave us? And my second question is, if I may, is around the impact on the costs of Waimea by making these changes. So some of our community get charged for Waimea requests based on the hikoi, the journey that they've been on, and the amount of requests and the contents of their requests. And there's charges with or without for some of us. I'm just wondering if these changes will affect that process.
Through the chair, in terms of your second point around the changes to Waimea, no, that won't have an impact on any costs associated with the Waimea. The charging rate that council has for Waimea is set out in our fees and charges, so that doesn't make any difference there. Apologies, your first question.
So Councillor Greening asked for us to have a report come back about does this change the scope of anything? And my question is, if we put it through now and then you come back for a report at the next meeting and go, oh, yep, these are the few subtle changes, where does that leave us?
Through the chair, at any time via formal resolution, council can amend the delegations that given to staff. So if you look at a subsequent report and decide that as a council you think that is more of a governance role than an operational role, you can then rescind that delegation. That's always one of your powers.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, then Councillor Murray.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, Faith, and thanks for answering the question that I emailed you. But I just want to, there's always in favour of being more open and transparent, and we owe that to our community. I'm just looking at one of the changes where it looks to me under section 15, providing documents, and it's gone from the chief executive, includes acting chief executive, to all council staff. Can I just have some clarification around what that actually means? Are there risks to that? Because while I'm, what information is going to go out, how is it actually going to look in real terms?
Through the chair, the reason for that change, and it's a bit of a quirk of the way the legislation is set up, is because technically every time someone asks information from council, it's a Waimea request. So every time someone rings up one of our lovely customer service people and asks what time the library open, technically a Waimea. So there's a very good reason why we don't treat them all as formal Waimeas for efficiency's sake. But because we are forced in local delegations to go section by section, we thought it out of abundance of caution it would be appropriate to ensure that all staff are able to respond to requests from their community.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment too? I'm interested in, as these come through, if there is a change of scope, that it is highlighted. I think that's really important, but I appreciate the work that's going on here, and it's actually
And I think picking up Leif's opening comments that next time we see the next, it will preempt the question that Councillor Greening asked, which has led to the addition of the resolution to get it. So next time it will be wrapped up in the next report. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just probably interested in the same thing, but for example, on page 521, section 146 or section 77, authority to sell or lease abandoned land. It's currently the chief executive adding the chief financial officer in, but where does council come in terms of, and I know it's just part of the Local Government Rating Act rather than what land we have, but I'm more interested in the detail of what this delegation means, because I'm unclear at what stage does things come to council, what stage do things not, and if this is a software package that a whole lot of councils are using, I'd just be interested in some other alternatives, like some examples of what level of delegations sit where, because I'm not that clear where all the delegations currently lie in council, which I guess is, even though there's 185 pages I could read.
Through the chair, sorry, it was section 77 that you were interested in, was it?
Oh, sorry, it's on page 521 and it's, I think it's one, yes, yeah, quote section 77. There's an amendment, it was section 7.
Yes, I got you. Through the chair, I will have to go away and look at section 77 in more detail. I haven't memorized the Rating Act yet, but I will note that even though a power has been delegated to a council officer, council still retains the opportunity to act in appropriate circumstances.
Thanks,
so, yeah.
And your answer is exactly the answer I have, is that I have no idea what it means, but you're asking as a governance group to go, let's just tweak this. So that's my, please, more explanation as we go through these.
Thank you, Councillor Murray, Councillor Greening, and then I think the resolution has been moved and seconded. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Greening.
Yeah. So just a follow-up question, and maybe just another point which I forgot to raise, which should hopefully aid the clarification process. My follow-up question is, in relation to the scope creep, which we're indicating, and you're going to go report back, at this present time, do you believe that there has been any scope change, i.e. that you don't anticipate staff will be doing anything different until we get that report back?
Through the chair, look, that is my understanding. This is us moving from in these cases, a general to a specific. So my understanding is that staff aren't doing any more work than they currently are. Okay,
so that's reassuring, and we look forward to seeing a report back. In relation to the items that you've listed in the report, in some instances in the paragraphs, the report itself, you've used CFO or blah, and in some instances maybe and. But in the revised digital document down in those tables, it just lists roles next to the section, and it's not clear if it's an and or an or. It's just a comma.
Through the chair, I mean, are you talking in that table there? So that's any one of those roles has the delegation to do that particular function, or act under that particular section.
Right.
So it's an or.
Yeah, it should be an or. So I just want to, in the spirit of clarification, maybe we should put that or in.
Or at least clarify it in one place that it means or.
Through the chair, yes, happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I will put the resolution. Steve.
I wonder if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, if we just respond to Councillor Greening's last comment, because I'm not sure at this stage if we can absolutely confirm that there won't be scope changes moving forward. I know that there are some examples that I have seen where I would like staff to have more delegation than they currently do. And a good example of that would be around our Microsoft licensing, for example, which carries over from year to year, but is a significant amount of money. And it doesn't necessarily require the chief executive, for example, to sign off on that amount of money. Because it's almost a machinery review once we've gone through the procurement panel and those sorts of things. So as we've heard, there's 180 something pages of delegations register. I would be very surprised if we went through that register as part of this process and we did find that there were some things that we wanted to update to reflect current costs and economics, or that there were some things that we wanted to update for the purposes of efficiency and the effective running of council.
And I think that's also, that will all be picked up, because my understanding is from the previous conversation that next time Leith presents a report, it will include clarification of where there are any suggested or proposed scope changes. Leith was only talking in terms of what's recommended today, and he doesn't believe, from his understanding, that there is any. We'll get that report back in the answer to Councillor Walker's question. Should something pop out, then the council has the ability to change that at that point. Righto, thank you very much. I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thanks, Leith. Richard, local water done well. So this is on page 535.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the report as read. Just one minor change. It's not significant, but in the recommendations, I've note number 5. I note that, and number 2, that this has to be approved by the 2nd of September 2025. Was enacted on the 2nd of September 2025, but DIA are now informing everybody that we have to have it done by the 3rd of September 2025. So it's just 1 day difference. So, I mean, you can leave it as it is. I mean, it's something we have to get done anyway, or you can be really strictly correct and put 3rd if you wanted to. Yeah.
I think we'll just change it to the 3rd. Is there anything you'd like to add before I open it up for questions?
No, I think there's a moving feast. There's new information came out this week around the formation of the various entities and what options councils have. But I'll probably cover those off in the operations report that I put together for a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. Just before I go to questions, I think the key thing here is, as Richard said, there are a lot of moving parts in this space. Everyone has to do their local water services delivery plan. The options around working with others, neighbours, one or more, are just that, they're options. But in any event, you still have to complete your own water delivery plan. As Richard noted, there is constant changes to the legislation coming through, many of which are actually beneficial to us as a council, particularly around our rural water supplies, and the options that are being provided around potential structures. I think we're also reasonably fortunate, unlike a number of our neighbours, to have retained quite a bit of the money that either came through the previous 3 waters processes. That gives us that ability to resource the kind of conversations and discussions that we'll have to have, regardless of whether we're doing this jointly with one or more partners or on our own. Other councils who used that money either in different ways or used it faster than we did, will have to resource it through their, obviously, budget rates and charges budgets. So with that, it's open for questions or moving and seconding. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a couple of questions, if I could. So we've got the $652,000. That's good. If in actual fact we're working with a neighbouring council, say for example Nelson City, have they got money left over as well? Have they allocated budgets in their current annual plan to participate? And then I have a couple of follow-up questions.
I have not contacted any of the, I contacted my counterparts at Nelson and Marlborough yesterday in anticipation of this resolution here. So I'm waiting till this resolution is passed before I have any further conversation. At this stage, I have not had any information about where they're at in terms of funding or even in the process of what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. We've got a Zoom meeting scheduled for next week. We're setting that up so that we at least see where each other's at and the ability of working together and how we do that. So that's still to happen.
Thank you. So understand that work's going to happen. If hypothetically we do enter into an arrangement with a neighbouring council to work together, would the basis of that be a clear kind of memorandum of understanding where each council understands what its commitment is?
At the moment, my report outlines this. We're following two paths, and I think whatever councils or council we work with is that we all work in our own water delivery service plans or water service delivery plans. We work on our own, and at some point we will then decide, right, how do we combine these and what resource do we use and how do we co-fund that? So that's going to be a discussion that we will have probably over the next 2 to 3 months. A lot of it's going to be based on the governance arms of each of those councils, on their appetite to continue those discussions and to enter into those relations and fund them. Particularly if they don't have the funding that we have, there may be a bit of a challenge and a bit of a hiccup there, but that's at this stage, I'm not sure what those hiccups are, but there may be some in that space, but we can have those discussions.
And then my last question, so in the announcements that we've seen come out, you know, it's been referred to as setting up a separate entity, and that's going to be fantastic because LGFA will be able to loan to those separate entities, and that will be a huge benefit for councils. So that's the tagline. And so could you just explain to me how we would benefit through that arrangement?
It's probably a bit too early to answer that question, but can I go back to your original comment? The way the legislation's been set up is the council can go on its own, like status quo, but it's got to set up a business unit within it and financially separate that from everything else. And your water service delivery plan has got to show that you're going to be sustainable over 30 years in that space. So I'm picking that most councils who think they're going to go on their own, that's probably going to be the tripping point. Now, the LGFA have indicated that if you do want to form entities, that they will, up to 500% of your income of the combined entity, they will loan that. And in terms of the interest rates on that, it's going to be determined on the Standard & Poor's rating for those councils, and they will average. So if the councils are slightly out of kilter, someone's got a AA plus or AAA plus or minuses, they actually, what the interest rate would be, then they would average them so that the combined entity would have an average interest rate on those loan charges. So that's all I've got at this stage, and I hope I've answered your question. But in terms of into the future, it all depends on those discussions and how we progress them. Yeah.
All right, no, it didn't really answer my question, but
fundamentally, we already borrow from the LGFA.
Correct, yeah.
The actual cost is unlikely to change. The advantage, as seen by the proponents, is you can borrow up to 500 times your revenue. You can borrow a lot more.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it any cheaper, given most councils, certainly us, and I think most of the other councils in top of the south already borrow money for this purpose from the LGFA.
Yeah, I completely get that. We can borrow more and potentially over a longer term, but actually I'm still to you know, understand how that is a benefit. So that's fine. I would just hold that because, you know, I mean, let's face it, there is no benefit.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wondered, given that we have iwi organisation that covers right across the top of the south, and is there at what point would they be engaged for you know, to be part of this process, and that we're moving towards partnership with iwi, and that they also have you know, connections or working in partnership with both Marlborough and Nelson City Council. So that could be seen to be, you know, a kind of stabilising or helpful process to include them in the process. At what point would that happen?
Probably not. We haven't forgotten about it. I'm wanting to get the landscape with the other neighbouring councils, but the intention is to have iwi involved in the discussions. How and when and how they do it, we haven't finalised that yet, but they will be part of it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kinnamonth, then Councillor Greening, and then Councillor Hill.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. Page 327, clause 2.3. Just you're going to set up a project board within our council here. You're going to obviously put bums on seats with some of Russell McGuigan's team to be that board, but also you're inviting office of external services. Is that just not what we normally do anyway? If you know, you're not going to increase the staffing levels, are you?
No, we're not. In fact, we've got a project board already set up. It's been meeting now for, well, it started last year with the Affordable Waters program, but we've kind of resurrected it again. Mayor Tim and the Chief Executive have been involved in a couple of the meetings to start with. One of the things that we will come back to you with is have perhaps a governance project board overseeing it with councillors and that on. I know one or two other councillors have done that. We haven't had those discussions yet, but certainly the project board is at officer level. We have engaged a company with resources who are very appropriate. We've been through our procurement exercise and they are now on board, and we're having our first workshop with them in a couple of weeks for them to plan out what we have to do over the next 12 months to get these water delivery service plans in place, and any other tasks that we have to do. And part of those tasks will be coming back to you with the options of setting up a governance board from council with councillors on board, just to overview what we're doing and how we're progressing. But at this point in time, I'm relying on my reports to the operations committee to keep you briefed on progress as we go. And there may be, because the operations committee only meets every 6 weeks, there may be situations where we need a governance board to make some quick decisions if we have to make them, rather than have to come back to council or operations committee. So we'll come back to you on that as we formulate the program going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Greening and Councillor Hill.
Yeah, just a little bit concerned with some of the use of the language, Richard. I'm not sure it's a when. I think it's an if. So just be careful with that. Don't want to predetermine where we land in terms of whether we use a CCO or not, and just continue the current operation. From my perspective, I mean, effectively what they're offering is access to more debt. And for those who have maxed out their credit card and can't access any more debt, they probably will be contemplating a CCO to then tap into that extra debt. I'm not sure we're quite at that stage yet. So it will be interesting to see what other benefits there are. I must admit, I'm not seeing many. But I'll wait for a more detailed response from staff as to where they do see benefits, pros and cons. But as I currently stand, I'm not really seeing any. But just make sure we're not using the word when. It should really just be a decision about if. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think not quite sure where the when is, but yeah, absolutely. I think it is very much if we choose one of the scenarios that we're unable to. Just on the last point that Councillor Greening made, can you just cover off what the do minimum option is? Is just doing exactly what we're doing on our own, presuming you can demonstrate to the government financial sustainability, an option, or at the very least, do we have to create an entity kind of within an entity?
No, the way I read it is that you go alone within the council or the current operation. It's just financially, it has to be separated from everything else that you do. So it has to be ring-fenced, totally ring-fenced, and but it operates within the council like what we do now. So in effect, if you look at the water with the water department, like we do ring-fence our accounts now. There is a little bit of cross-subsidy that goes on, but with this particular entity, you could go alone, but you have to ring-fence it. Yeah. Okay.
Right, thank you.
Can I just add one comment about the debt to revenue at the moment? I've just looked at a spreadsheet that I prepared last year for, I think it was one of the Rotaries, and I did some work on it. At the moment, within the three waters activities, our debt to income ratio is about 253%. So we've got double headroom. Yeah.
Okay, ultimately, someone still has to pay. Someone still has to pay. Having more headroom and borrowing more money isn't necessarily, well, almost definitely isn't making it cheaper and more affordable for people. Okay, thank you, Councillor Hill, then Councillor Mailing.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Some things are becoming more apparent to me as the conversation's going on, and I concur with Councillor Mackenzie around, the economy of scale is just not there as, compared to the previous iterations. And I don't know that ratepayers want to know about that we're going to have access to a whole lot of extra debt, which is extra rates ultimately. But I think one of the things I'm thinking about is I don't want us to enter a process with our neighbouring councils, and I'm assuming that includes Buller. When we say neighbouring, are we thinking Buller? Could be. Okay, so in the mix, yeah. I'm interested in what process we might design in a, simple way to ensure that we don't head off down the track of doing a whole lot of work and negotiating. And at some point down the road, when it seems like we're into something and the pin gets pulled by somebody else and we've wasted a lot of effort, resource and money. So I just imagine that we'll have some process where there are pinch points where we go, we're in or out, or this is possible, this isn't, or so there needs to be design somehow of a process, I think, that we understand what we're entering into and aren't wasting our time. And political decisions don't pop in there and waste a whole lot of work. And I'm assuming that all the work, huge amount of work done towards Three Waters and whatever the last thing was called, around our information and detail of what we have, that must be contributing to what we're going to have to do now in terms of a plan. Is there a question there? Possibly not.
There is a question. Going back to the discussions at this stage, it's just discussions at officer level to see where the various councils, whether it's 3 or 4, involved in those discussions. The key thing is the 2 parallel paths I talked about. Initially, we're going to be working on our own water service delivery plans, because that's got to be the baseline for each council to determine whether they're into a combined one or not. Now, the outcome of that, don't know. Buller have indicated an interest in having discussions with us, and the mayor has obviously approached Tim about that, and they just want to enter into discussions to see about the feasibility of it. So they obviously don't want to commit to anything at this point, but at this point in time, they committed to working with us. The other task of work would be to take this information and combine it together to see what the net outcome is for everybody and how that distributes that. And that would have to be done so that each council can see their own plan, the combined plan, and decide which way they want to go. And that, I'm not sure when that would happen. I would suspect it probably won't be until May, June, July next year, prior to submitting these plans for final approval, I suspect. But we haven't done the program and the timing at this stage, but I understand your call. And I think at this point in time, we are committed to doing ours. Now, in the discussions with DIA, they have offered all the information that we presented to the NTU, a part of the potable waters. They sent out a spreadsheet of what they believe the information should be for the new water services delivery plans. And I have to say the spreadsheet is just mind-boggling. But they have offered to use the information that we sent to fill up our spreadsheet and send it to us so that we've got something to work on. So I asked for that yesterday from them. So that'll be coming through, and we'll be using that as our baseline with our expert advisors to actually start working through the financial aspects of those plans. But that's just information as well.
That's helpful to know. And in terms of the mana o te wai hierarchy and the change there, do you know what that will mean? Do we have any idea of what it actually means in terms of what happens on the ground? Is this a political posturing, or is there something of substance in its meaning?
I think at this point in time, my comment to those that question me about this is that Manawatu is kind of very parallel to what the RMA requires in terms of protecting the environment. And I think whatever we do with this new water entity, we're still going to have those requirements and those standards in terms of taking water away and putting water back. So I'm picking that wherever Manawatu sits, that we'll be pretty closely aligned in what we do and how we consult with and how we partner with Maori. Yeah.
So you're agreeing with me that it might be political posturing, Mr. Kirby?
I'm not making any comment in that light.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Mailing.
A couple of comments and a question. The question really is the rural water supply changes. I think that will benefit us significantly, simply because the standards that were going to be set were going to be very onerous, and our particular rural supplies started off as stock water supplies. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that is fair. And also they've taken away the rules around the what community supplies are now in terms of what has to apply. And I think it's a population of 25 is the limit now, as opposed to what it was previously with one house serving another house. So that's relaxed it quite a lot. So a lot of the rural communities that provide, will want to be caught up in that. But you're right about the rural water supply schemes. They have relaxed that slightly and been a bit more practical and pragmatic about it, yes.
Well, I think that's what we asked for in our submission when we went to Wellington that day, Richard. The roll call rightly. The other thing is, if you look at our councils around us, two of them are very similar in some ways. That we have provincial towns and then a reasonable rural area with lots of rural supplies. Well, particularly Buller and particularly Marlborough, but Nelson's a little bit different, but they still have rural supplies. And the one thing that is different is for us is that we already have a joint wastewater plant that we own jointly with the two. So that makes us maybe slightly different from some other councils. So we'll have to deal with that in some way. Right.
Yes, that was raised by Nathan yesterday because the memorandum of understanding between the two councils expires next year, 30th of June. And they was talking about whether we renew it. So we've said we'd roll it over another couple of years until we know exactly what's going to happen with the NRSBU in these discussions and how we progress. So that memorandum of understanding, we've asked for it to be rolled over. There are clauses in that understanding to say that by mutual agreement, both councils can break away from it. So that's a trigger point if we have to break off earlier.
The one final comment I'd make is it's the same people paying. Wherever you put it, however you spread the debt, it's the same people paying. So that's the one thing that I think central government doesn't want to hear, but that's the truth.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for the report. There was just so much to plough through, and that year's going to go pretty darn quick, isn't it? And with so much already up in the air at this point. So while we're looking at the possibility of working with other councils and CCOs and astronomical debt, which is, I'm no great fan of. Within this process, is there an area that we could, perhaps work alone to make our own decisions and make our own choices, but an option to work together with other councils in the area of things like procurement and to try and make savings in that kind of area? And so is that being added into that story?
Everything's available at the moment, and perhaps I just clarify a bit on timing. One of the key things that we have to do is consultation on our water service delivery plan. So when I say we'll be just finalising it June, July next year, we probably have to have our draft pretty well done in the next 6 months so that we can do the consultation probably March, April, May on what we're intending to do. And each council will have to do that. And that will also include whether we work together in a combined entity, or it may actually be, and I'll quote an example, it may be that Buller says, well, can we piggyback on your contract, your current water or waste contract, and they do that for us and we pay them under the same contract that you got. Those are the sort of things that are open and available. And as we have those discussions, it may be that some of the water supply delivery plans may go along those lines, that we actually supply Buller at the service delivery end and not actually combine them and fund everything together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very key point, because I think there's a lot of, there are almost endless options The only thing we know we have to do is everyone has to develop a local water delivery plan by a certain date, and you have to demonstrate financial sustainability. Exactly what that looks like, still not entirely clear. However, there is some guidance around there, and there's a lot of conversations around how is DIA, are they the arbiter? I'm not sure who the actual arbiter of financial sustainability is going to be.
I think DIA got experts to actually outline that, so we'll wait and see.
But absolutely, I think Councillor Ellis's point is the key one. There are a range of variations on working together that don't necessarily mean totally combining assets, cross-subsidisation. Asset management and ownership may be separate from procurement and delivery, and there may be benefits to one or more parties in those different potential structures. The key thing from my perspective of this is just to start from a point that we are happy to collaborate and consider the options of working together with one or more parties. If it becomes apparent as we go through to one or more of those parties that actually they're better off on their own or they want to do, that's entirely fine. But starting from the point of being willing to work with others, to look at the options, to look at the benefits, with the variations that Councillor Ellis pointed out that may come into that conversation, from my perspective, is the key thing. Where we end up as a kind of just will be a result of the process. And again, we're going to run into that awkward time of, we get through all this, we got really big crunchy decisions that'll be politically significant, and a local government election will be looming in October, and by the time you get to June, July, August, everyone will be in campaign mode if they restart. It's just, timing's not ideal, but we just have to get on and work through it. So I'm looking for someone to move the resolution if someone is keen. So Councillor Hill, and then potentially seconded Councillor Dowler. And Councillor Dowler, you wish to speak? Okay, all good. Is there anything further? If not, thank you. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Someone like to move the machinery resolutions? Move Councillor Mailing, seconded Deputy Mayor Bryant. All those in favour, please say aye. Chief Executive's update. So just noting Steve sitting in for Leonie. I was going to say Janine there for a minute. Leonie, who is away. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Leonie's at the Taituara conference in Auckland today, so I'm happy to sit in for her report. I'll take it as read. A couple of things that I'd like to point out for members, though. This year's report acknowledges the passing of Kingi Tuheitia Pototo Whiriwhiro VII. Also that we won the Super Steward Award for our work restoring the Mangatawhai Black Valley wetland. And councillors will remember that this time last year, Mayor Tim won the Super Leader Award at the same conference. So we're looking for a three-peat next year. And also, I draw councillors' attention to the Buchanan and Marshall pool fencing case that has been picked up by the Supreme Court on a question of law. So I think that's reasonably significant for us in terms of where that case has gone to. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. It's open for questions and or moving and seconding. Councillor Greening and then Councillor Butler.
Through the chair, just 5 matters to raise, if I can just work through them. The first one, we had a very compelling presentation this morning from the community on Sam's Creek. And I think the invitation was for council to gather their thoughts and put a submission in. I think that's something we should do. I'm just wondering how we can begin that process.
Thanks very much for that question for my first one. Can I, I'll take that away and find out how that may be accommodated. This council may well want to make a submission. I'll speak with governance about how we can put that in train.
Fantastic.
I think the key thing is submitting on what, to whom. At the moment, we have made a submission under fast track legislation, which was certainly part of the presentation this morning. There, as far as I'm aware, there is no current application for anything that we have seen. There may be something in the fast track legislation or an application that's been put in, but we don't know what that is currently. So, and then we also have to remember we have a role as the consenting authority / administrator. So we do have to tread a fine line between when we are the body that is responsible for considering applications for activities, staking out a position either in support or opposition to those activities comes with its own challenges. So point noted, Steve will provide some advice, but I do think we have to be a little careful based on one presentation for one group of people before the council starts to make submissions in support or opposition of these sort of applications, particularly before the fast track legislation's even actually been
well, this is what we need to
finalised.
start. Yes. So I'm just conscious that they have published, I think, a list of those items that have been added for consideration for fast tracking. So we can check into that. But yeah, I welcome the CCO's investigating. That's fantastic. I don't see it as much of a conflict because we can put a submission in, it can be rejected, and then we'll then have to process it. And we'll do that objectively, I'm sure. My second point is just in relation to, again, a theme that has come through emails and conversations from the public. And I've raised this before, but I'm going to keep on raising it because I'm still seeing it. And that is a general frustration in dealing with this council. Two examples.
Earlier than I anticipated.
I'll call them Caroline and Bill. And in Caroline's observations, which I'm really interested in, is this general frustration that council is not explaining things or responding to questions or answering questions. And I think that is a real concern. And it's not just Caroline, it's a number of people who are saying this. And I've raised this also through...
Who's Caroline?
I'm happy to forward you the email. I'm just calling her Caroline at the moment.
Oh, it's always handy if you're referring to emails in the public that you circulate the emails.
I don't know if I have permission to use the person's name, so I'm just calling it Caroline for now. But I'll certainly...
if it's a complaint about us or a concern that's raised and it's an email to you, then...
Oh no, it's been emailed across several councillors. I'm sure some councillors in the room know what I'm talking about. And the other one, which I'm calling Bill, is in relation to an encounter with our customer services people, where he wanted to migrate from postal invoicing to digital invoicing, something that we should embrace and encourage. And what's happened is we've refused to do it. And we refused to do it because until he went to our website and ticked a box that he had read the terms and conditions, we weren't going to action that response. And I find that really strange customer service attitude. We should be encouraging this. The process, I think, that when we respond to these type of inquiries or requests from customers is to go, yep, we'll action it. We'd like you to read the terms and conditions. You may have a problem getting out to our website to tick that box, although to be really frank, I think tick boxing it doesn't actually confirm they've read it, but anyway. And then in that response, email them the terms and conditions and say, well, here's some terms and conditions, make sure you read them, and we're going to action your request, rather than saying we're not actioning your request until you've ticked this box on our website.
So I take it in there somewhere as a question. The question, I think, is the process around people shifting from postal to electronic invoicing.
Well,
Steve,
my question really is,
do you have an answer?
Our processes don't seem very customer friendly.
Yes. So
can they change?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your question. I think it's quite difficult for me to unpack what you're talking about there when we are talking about hypotheticals.
This is a real instance.
But being equally hypothetical, Councillor, I have seen the exchange between you and the Chief Executive, and I believe, to my mind, your question was answered pretty fully and pretty accurately. So if you want to share that information with this council more fully, then I'm sure we could equally share that answer
I'm happy to circulate it. The answer from the CEO was we're not changing our processes and we won't action his request. Which I find just unfair. I think the governance team need to be concerned with that attitude.
Councillor Greening, so rather than us all wait around slightly in the dark, because you've obviously had both correspondence backwards and forwards on this issue that none of us are currently aware of. So if you circulate the information and if at the next CEO report there remains a concern, then we can all have the benefit of having seen the background information, which is very difficult right at this moment for the rest of us to
yeah, fair enough. But I have fairly summarised what happened. There's not much more to it, but I'm happy to circulate the email. But that's pretty much the story. So that's a concern, and I think we need to be,
because there's some aspects of positive affirmation of online actions that we are required to carry out, and that extends beyond just sending information passively in an email, and that was pointed out to you.
So third question.
I'll come back to that. Was not at all what was happening there. My third, thanks. Moving along. My third aspect is just the legal disputes that have been going on, and we've spoken before about a dispute that's going on with some individuals who have come into contact with council over their minor home. Their tiny home, and we have a court case that's come out in our favour. And we're now in a situation where the rules are likely to change through some government reform to minor homes. So I am conscious, given also, to be really frank, these people were probably trying to do the right thing, which is look after a person who was desperate for some housing, and I understand now has made an application in for emergency accommodation because they can no longer reside where they were. That we shouldn't be overly, how can I put it, heavy-handed in dealing with them. I think they've got the message, and we should back off a little bit.
So again, I don't think it's appropriate. It is an ongoing court case because of my understanding. I think it may have been further appealed. So again, I don't think it's an appropriate conversation for us to have.
Well, I'm happy to entertain it in confidence if we want to do it
in the public discussion. And ultimately, we also have to be very careful where our role in governance / operations, particularly around legal matters and compliance. We are there to set if you just let me finish. So in terms of compliance and the process, we do have to be careful. We set policy, and then we have an expectation that that's administered and implemented by council staff. And we also have policy around how enforcement is undertaken and followed through. So I think we have to be very mindful of where our role starts and stops around compliance, enforcement, and particularly in the case where there is an ongoing legal process. So point noted, and you've raised it, but I think that's where it should sit for the moment.
Okay, I'm happy to talk to this in committee as well if you want to indulge me in that as well. The other point I want to raise is an article that appeared in the Nelson Mail. It was a letter to the editor, and it was coming from the deputy mayor. So it was a representation from council, and I read it's in relation to comments made by Mr. Timo Naubauer, and the comment from the deputy mayor representing council was that his claims were unsubstantiated. And these were his claims that council was covering open fields and vineyards with concrete.
So can you just confirm how this relates to the CEO's report? Because now you're talking about an article in the Evening Mail or a letter to the editor.
Well, this is a representation from council, so this is the forum to discuss it, right?
No, because this is the CEO's report.
Okay, so where should a representation of council be raised in your report or the CEO?
You can bring it up under my report.
Okay.
So we'll hold it to then.
Okay, fantastic. because I do have some concerns about what was stated, and I think they're incorrect. And in my final report, in my final matter, sorry, report, I just want to raise again, and maybe I'll talk to this in the Mayor's report, but I got a report from our CEO this morning, or late last night, I should say, so I couldn't really read it until this morning, in relation to my concerns raised about the NMIT submission process. And I'm a little bit concerned about how that process went about. To our CEO's credit, she investigated the dispute. She's made some statements, and I'm again concerned with what was said in that. So this is in relation to discussion with the CEO. Can I raise this matter in this instance, or do you want me to raise it in your Mayoral instance?
Yeah, you can raise it in my Mayoral report, given that
There's a response from the CEO.
Leonie's not here, so I'll cover it anyway under that report. So you can bring it up again under my report, seeing as that's where the item is actually contained.
Yeah. So, but it's also in relation to the response I got from the CEO. But yep, I'll park it and come back to those. Okay, yep. Thank you.
Councillor Walker, and then Councillor Kinamont, then Councillor Murray.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So this is in the CEO's report, and I guess I have a question, and that is this ongoing problem that we have with pool fencing and consents. Can you please advise me how many more people are in this position within our community? Because I get that this one has gone to the process of the Supreme Court. I'm mindful of a few in my local community who haven't got to the court process, and God forbid that they do because of costs for everybody. But how many are we finding within community at the minute? Thanks.
I don't have that information to hand. I can find out for you, unless Leith does, but I doubt that he will either.
And I think ultimately, while the question has come and it's referred to in this particular case because it's a Supreme Court, so hence it's under the CEO's thing, in terms of the Environment and Regulatory Committee, a report, if that's probably the appropriate place to get a report on the overall issue around pool fencing regulations and the number of people who find themselves in a range of different circumstances, not many to the extent that this particular one, but there are a range of more minor through to still quite significant. Leith.
Through the chair, nothing further to add from your summary, Mr. Mayor.
So if an action item is to get a report back on the issue around pool fencing compliance, etc., to the Environment and Regulatory Committee, that will be noted in the minutes. And
awesome, thank you.
Councillor Kinamont and then Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Through the chair, clause 9.1, Lagoima update. You've had 517 requests so far this calendar year. And same for the whole year of 2023, you had 512 requests. You're getting a 30% increase in Lagoima requests. I'm concerned, two things. Have you got enough staff to cope with this? And if you haven't, have you got plan B of enlarging the staff to carry out this work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are working really hard to respond to the significant number of requests that we've got. And it is causing us a significant amount of pressure on the staff that are involved in responding to Lagoima requests. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I'm sure Leith will have it with respect to the number that have missed their due date. It is very, very few. So we continue to work very, very hard, and we are watching very, very closely to see what we might need to do should these numbers continue to either persist or grow. Leith, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Through the chair, just a note on staffing. So we say we've got 517 Lagoima requests this year. That's not, we can't fix that by adding people to my Lagoima team, because essentially my Lagoima team sends those out to the organisation to answer. So it's putting pressure on the organisation as a whole rather than just the legal team, which is under pressure as well. But if you're thinking about FTEs in the future, that's where you need to think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the same section, Leith, or it might be Steve. So it references the link to council's website for the Lagoima. I see nothing there. I thought we were going to post the question and answers so that we didn't have duplication and we didn't have that. So the last one that was posted was the 8th of the 2nd, 24. So all these Lagoima requests that different people have asked, and I know in Motueka there's probably quite a lot for one land site that multiple people may be asking. We must be duplicating by not having the answers from other Lagoima requests somewhere that other people can find. So it just seems crazy to me that we're not, but I'm sure we were told they would be. The answers would be posted on the website.
I'll go first, and then Leith can follow on. So through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly that's our intention. Not everybody asks the same question the same way, so we need to go through a process of making sure that we are responding to the question that has been asked. And where we can, it is certainly our intention to post these things onto a publicly available site so that we can simply refer people who are asking the same question to those sites. And an example that we spoke about earlier on was delegations. When we get Lagoima around delegations, then hopefully local delegations will enable us to do that far more effectively than we are at the moment. But I know Leith's got more background on this than I have.
Yeah, through the chair. So this is where it does impact my team. Because the process of publishing individual responses to the website as it currently stands is quite time consuming. There's redactions of people's names and other details that's potentially involved. So what we have done, and I think we've advised the council of this in the past, is that where we're getting lots of Lagoimas about a specific topic, and I can see there's about 8 different topics there, we are grouping them and bundling them up and putting them up as one big document. So you can search through all of our Lagoimas in relation to the Waimea Community Dam. That's a significant amount of work that my team chips away as they can. I am hopeful that under the new CRM system, when it eventually comes in, that we will be able to make that process much quicker and much easier.
So just a final comment. So I'm in Strands, I guess the Motueka Aerodrome is contentious. I've seen the same question asked by 3 different people that I'm seeing the same question that you must be answering 3 different ways. It just seems, I guess I'm hoping that the CRM will solve it, because some of the questions don't seem unreasonable. And I know there's an alternative motive for the answer, but they don't seem unreasonable questions at the time that, it's frustrating. And I can see why there's 500.
Right. Anything else? Someone move that the CEO's report be received. Moved Deputy Mayor Bryant, seconded. Councillor Shellcrest. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Right, we will move to the Mayor's activity update. Try and get that done before we break. So just as I said earlier, Councillor Walker has a time commitment. So we'll break at 2:30, close to, come back at 1, and we'll go into committee and deal with the items related in committee, starting with Motueka Service Centre recommendations. So go to my thing. So I'll take it as read. Like I apologise for the fact that as part of being invited to be involved in a working group alongside the councils at the top of the south, iwi, various other parties, Chamber of Commerce, in relation to NMIT, I may have got slightly over enthusiastic and trying to be helpful. Wrote a submission, sent it. Unfortunately, it did refer to the Tasman District Council as opposed to from myself. So Councillor Greening raised the issue, I withdrew it, reworded it from myself. It's now on there. Should the council endorse the sentiments or things contained within it, I'm happy to resend it from the council. If people are happy with it as it is, I'm equally happy to do that. So I do apologise to the council for in my enthusiasm to be of assistance, referring to it as a council submission as opposed to one that came from myself. But there has been a number of meetings with that group Ironically, that question actually isn't asked in the consultation document over standalone. There are a whole lot of questions around the structure and what's proposed and various things, which I've also tried to cover as opposed to just focusing on MIT being a standalone entity. But in terms of the top of the South and the feedback and the request was from that combined group of people that they all genuinely believe there is advantages to the region of having a standalone tertiary training institute based in top of the South. So that is the background to that one. Number of the other things on there are all self-explanatory. So I'm happy to open up for questions or comments. Councillor Greening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I certainly welcome the comments that you've made in relation to it. My concern with it, and the reason why I raised it, was because I felt you were representing the council, and the council hadn't had the opportunity to actually convey as a group where they laid. And I think it's important that when you're representing the council, that councillors have that opportunity. And that's why I've raised it. I must admit, I've had rather confusing advice coming through, and I think as to whether you're acting individually or as the mayor or whatever, and that's been a story in itself. And I will probably respond to Leonie in that regard. But the story was changing, at least from the staff's perspective, as to what was going on, which never smells very good. But anyway, it is also unfortunate we haven't had the opportunity to put in a submission. There were countering views to the ones that I'd heard put forward. I personally have concerns within MIT standing alone. Perhaps that's because I've been intimately involved in the road reforms in the background. And I'll leave my comment there. But submission's closed today, so we've missed any opportunity to signal that, and I fully welcome the apology that the Mayor has provided. My other comment that I raised earlier was in relation to letters to the editor or letters to the Mail from the Deputy Mayor. And I was a little bit concerned about what was being written there, because the Deputy Mayor is representing council as well, and I felt that what was stated was not accurate. And the response, this is in relation to Timo Niba raising concerns about what he sees as covering fields and vineyards with concrete, i.e. Residential development in primary industry areas, and greenfield development, because his preference is more brownfield. The comment that was made, which I was taken back by, was the comment that Mr. Niebau's concerns were unsubstantiated. And I don't know why that comment was made on behalf of council, because it's quite clearly outlined in our FDS about what areas we're looking to develop, and they include rural one areas, some which are currently vineyards, and other areas. So I did struggle to understand why Deputy Mayor would say they're unsubstantiated. And I think they are substantiated, and I think Mr. Niebau has responded through other means to respond to those statements. But I think in representing council, I don't think we should be making what clearly are incorrect statements to the public.
Okay, thank you for noting that point. I'm not sure there's much more we can do other than you've raised your concern. And
well, will the Deputy Mayor be retracting that statement?
Not at all.
Oh, really? So we're going to perpetuate a false statement?
Well,
it's not a false statement.
So I'm not entering into a debate about the merits or otherwise, or false or not. Ultimately, a view has been expressed by both parties. They have their own perspectives and points of views. I think we'll just leave it where it is. You have noted your perspective, Councillor Greening. So thank you very much for that.
Just don't think we should be making false statements. Otherwise, we're bringing our own council into disrepute. That's all.
Your point is noted.
Thank you.
Is there anything further on my report? If not, I'll move it be received. Someone second Thank you, councillor Mailing. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And last, Mike, well, I'll get you to present. We might have a slightly shorter lunch if it is going to. There is an item obviously in the confidential agenda that relates to Waimea Dam. So, Mike, if you'd like to introduce this item, we'll see if it looks like it's going to be an extensive conversation, in which case we will break and come back to it post the in-committee.
Through Mr. Mayor, this is a straightforward update report. It covers off the business plan and 5-year budget, which now been received from Waimea Water Limited. We've compared to those to what we provided for in the long-term plan. I gave councillors this morning an updated schedule. Unfortunately, there was an error in the report. What it shows is in the first couple of years of the LTP, we have provided for higher water charges than what look like than what are coming through in the 5-year plan. I'd remind councillors that these plans are in their very early stages at this time, so the numbers are likely to move around over the next couple of years as the company settles down into a normal operational mode. I think the other key milestone that's referred to in the report is that the company has met its obligations under the consents, and the dam is now being deemed to be fully operational. That comes into effect on the 16th of September. That is a really big milestone, because with that milestone, the provisions in the TRMP relating to a with dam situation come into effect. And so this summer, the irrigation season starts on 1 November. The with dam provisions are in place, and therefore the ability of non-affiliated consent holders to take water will be restricted, and the water augmentation will flow through to those who are affiliated in regards to the dam. Other than that, I'm happy to take the report as read.
Thank you, Mike. It's open for questions. Move, councillor Dowler. Yeah, just a second. That's fine. Yep. Yeah. So move, councillor Dowler, seconded Deputy Mayor Bryant, and then councillor Greening.
And I am happy. I could ask these later if you wanted to save time. But more might be. Okay, just in relation to the role of Waimea Water Limited going forward, will they be the dam operator for some considerable time? Is there a time frame on that? Or is it likely in time that that could come back to some other form of management?
The purpose of Waimea Water Limited is to own and operate the dam, and that is for the foreseeable future. Would require an agreement between the shareholders to transfer that obligation back to council.
Just about the new regulations and the affiliated and unaffiliated, will they be, they don't really come into effect until there's restrictions, as I understand it. In fact, the mayor might be able to answer that.
Well, the impact is when restrictions come in, and it's a significant difference under the operative rules now that the plan correct.
That will really affect the unaffiliated.
So if we have a dry summer and restrictions, yeah, the restriction regime is substantially different under the now operative rules, that the dam is operational, than they were under the previous couple of summers where we're operating under the interim rules. Correct. Okay, thank you. Councillor Greeny's put his hand down again. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mike, just so I'm clear, so the unaffiliated water users will have more restrictions of water take, but as a result of the community benefits and the cost of the dam, they'll be paying more in water. What? Than post-dam. So non-affiliateds, they'll have conditions and rationalisation that the affiliated members that the dam don't. But the rating units for some of those non-affiliated people that will be paying an increased water rates will be higher than it was previously. So over the last 3 years, has the water rates gone up for those people and now they're going to have access to less water because they're not affiliated?
Two components to the answer to that question, councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's two components to the answer. Those users who are on the urban supply, they have seen an increase in the cost of water to the urban supply as the cost of the dam has come into effect. So those use water increases. The affiliated consent per se, you do not get a water charge for your affiliated consent or unaffiliated consent. If you've got an affiliated consent, you get a charge from Waimea Irrigators Limited for the affiliated, for that consent. The community as a whole within both district-wide and within the zone of benefit makes a contribution towards the environmental and other benefits that flow from the dam. Those costs have gone up to everybody. So everybody's paying a bit more, but it's not directly related to whether or not you have a bore on your property and whether or not it's consented or unconsented.
So affiliated water users have had the benefit of the dam in the last season. They got the benefit of restrictions being removed at the latter part because the water being released, but they actually pay nothing towards the water that they are using from the dam. As Mike said, the rates that relate to everybody in the district, yes, have gone up, but affiliated water users don't make any contribution to the irrigation related water coming from the dam. They don't pay a hectare charge, they're not affiliated.
Oh, they're not affiliated.
That's Brent's question was, yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Greening.
Thank you. This is more just I suppose a consistency of inquiry, given I asked the question last time we were in open session, so I'll open it again, which is fully acknowledge that we were in dispute, and we've now seen that the estimated cost to complete is currently sitting at 207.5 million. Last time we were in open session, I asked the question, what do we anticipate will be the total quantum of the amount disputed? And the response at the time was, we do not know. So my question again is around that, and do we now know?
Three, Mr. Mayor. The claims from the joint venture have been received, but I'm unable to disclose those because they're subject to confidentiality and further negotiation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Bearing in mind there is another item in relation to the Waimea Dam in committee part of the agenda. If not, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we'll now break for lunch. We'll come back as close. So we go into committee first. Moved, Councillor Mailing, seconded. And that Gareth Worthington and Bevan Peachy of Russell McVeigh are permitted to remain as included in the resolution. Moved, Councillor Mailing, seconded, Deputy Mayor Bryant. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So when we come back, we'll be in committee. The first item will be the one relating to Waterweka.
Just a quick point of order. The report coming back in committee is because we received an email this morning at 7:30 a.m. or something that the entire report had been updated. Is that now a new report that we have to accept as a late new report?
Yeah.
Or is it
Robin will provide an answer. Hang on. So, Robin?
No, it wasn't the entire report. It was just one attachment.
One attachment. Okay. So that's not treated as a late report?